welcome to Directionally Correct, a Beyond podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Sandra Loughlin, Chief Learning Scientist at EPAM Systems.
Hey, Directionally Correct fans. If you're looking to stay connected to the podcast, make sure to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, watch our videos on YouTube, or listen to the podcast on your app of choice. This podcast is dedicated to you to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. We are a listener-supported podcast, so please consider becoming a patron. If you'd like to support the podcast by becoming a patron, you can find a link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for being a listener. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
Like there was a guy that I knew that like invested all of his RSUs into crypto, and it peaked, and he just fucking retired at like 40. It's like, great, good for you, man.
Well, did he get out though? Because I mean, there was like the crypto bust. Did he?
I never heard the end of it. I know that he left. He's like, I'm cashing in. I'm done with working.
That's wild. Well, did you cash in all your RSUs, Sandra, into crypto?
No, thanks. No. Nope. Don't see how that's gonna. I mean, I'm sure it'll come at some point, but it's not mature enough for me to put real money into that yet.
It's a wild system, right? You got to be in it.
Yeah, is the way they call it the pump and dump.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah.
Buy some like Hawk 2 coin.
So gross. Ew.
I think that's our first Hawk Tour reference on the podcast. Well done, Scott. Well, speaking of unsavory things, Sandra, one of the things that in preparation for this podcast I was fascinated to find out was your fascination with poo-poo, or some people call it the microbiome nowadays.
The human microbiome is a favorite term of mine.
Yeah. Educate us on what we don't know about our microbiome.
I've been out of this world for a few years now because I have moved past it. But it's like, I don't know, so much of what happens in your mind and actually comes from your actual gut, and it's through the vagus nerve. It's just really fascinating. And so they're trying to figure, scientists are trying to figure out how much of what we think is controlled by our brain is actually controlled by the bacteria in our gut. So it's just a really mental health and weight gain and skin care. I mean, it's everything. So much stuff. It's very cool.
It's like toxoplasmosis, right? That's a hit on this pod. It's like this brain controlling amoeba. But I mean, quite literally, someone's full of shit, right? And it controls their whole attitude.
It does. And they actually do poop transplants. They take poop from one person and they put it in another person, and it improves their life. It's cool. Crazy.
I think we're stepping on the lead though. How do you get involved in this? We just went straight into your way into poop. How do we go from I'm a brilliant learning scientist to poop research?
You know what? I'll try to find. I can't find a connection. I don't actually know. It's just
okay.
Two parts of my life that just happened to co-occur.
I do love an open aperture, just open to anything. Yeah.
Just high openness to experience. I'll be honest. I've thought about doing the poop transfer because I think my microbiome is way off. So.
Just eat more fiber. That'll change it all up real fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
The flora and the fauna are just not communicating the way they ought to be.
Too much fauna.
Too much fauna.
Well, Sandra, you are one of the premier minds in the skill space. And I've been following your work for a little while now. And shout out to Mark Hansen for really tipping me off to the brilliance that is Sandra. But we recently had a guest on the podcast, Mark Efron, who kind of poo-pooed all over some of the skill stuff that's going on. And so I was wondering, from a skills expert like you, Sandra, I don't know, did you get a chance to listen to that episode? I don't know if you did, but
I did.
And kind of what's going on in that space, and what should people be paying attention to?
Just skill broadly?
Yeah, or just tell us a little bit about yourself. I guess is more on the nose.
Bow hunting skills, trapping skills.
I do have all of those skills. Okay, so I'm a learning scientist. So prior to coming to EPAM, which is a company that I work for, I was a professor at the University of Maryland, taught learning science and business. And so it's like I had this, I don't know, to put it like, I guess, super simply, I think my superpower is getting people to do hard things. Because learning is not the same as like teaching somebody. Learning is actually super hard. And getting people to function in an organized like business environment also super hard. So I kind of put those things together, and that's what I was teaching. And then I stumbled upon EPAM. It's like a long story, but basically I found this company, software engineering, professional services company that like on their own with zero input from HR just built this like amazing skills-based organization before it was a thing. And like they started 30 years ago. And when I saw this and what it did in particular for learning, I was like, I've got to go and work for this amazing organization because they have figured out stuff that no one else that I've ever seen has figured out. And so, yeah. And so like I've been here for like 6-7 years now, and I began talking about EPAM Skills Story, but it was because actually of an article that I read by Mark Efron like a year-ish ago. And it's been a kind of a cool, crazy ride in the ensuing 12 months because I think this whole skills thing it's really blowing up in a good and bad way, I guess.
What does that look like? I mean, like I don't know how much you can actually spill the company beans, right? But skills taxonomies, the skills-based hiring, all this sort of stuff is all over LinkedIn. But I think like the naysayers would say like, yes, but they're ever changing. Like, how can we ever keep up? Like, how can we even know what skills are coming down the road? How does EPAM do it? Or, a other sort of company that you don't want to attach EPAM's name to, how would they handle skills-based hiring, training, this sort of stuff, just to keep up with the current?
Would you say that skills are worth the squeeze, or the juice is worth the squeeze?
Yes, but here's the thing. Skills is one piece of data. Like what we're talking, skill, it's one piece. It's a big, important piece, but there are so many other pieces. Like what this all is like data-informed decision-making around people.
Okay.
Like it's not, it seems like this big, exciting thing, and it is different than what has been done before, but it's not like a crazy, like new age concept. It's just like right now, companies have basically no data on their people compared to like their customers or their factories or their manufacturing plants. Like we know shockingly little about the people that we have in our organization, and shockingly little actually from a granular perspective on the work to be done. And so because of that, we're not very good at doing anything related to people. We hire based on like, I don't know, rough ideas based on someone's degree or like,
They're my nephew.
They're my nephew. Like we promote people based on God knows what, right? We make actually very uninformed decisions around people. And so this whole skills movement is just a subset of a broader business orientation toward like, let's have data and use it to make decisions. Skills is one piece, but there are so many other ones.
Well, let's call balls and strikes. So what is the skills hype and the skills bullshit that people should be avoiding? And what's the reality there? And like, because I think you actually can talk a little bit about what's been going on at your journey at EPAM as well. Like what's real, what's hype, and kind of separate the wheat from the chaff.
Okay. So all the benefits that I've ever seen articulated about this theoretical, like unicorn skills-based org, they're all true and more. Like there are things that EPAM can do that people don't even like talk about because it's like, it's so far removed from reality. So it's true. Like you do hire better. You do retain people better. People are more engaged in their work. You do get better products and services because you have better people in the roles doing the product and the service. So I think all of that is true. What I've seen go badly, there's a bunch of things that I've seen go badly in this space. So one is this over rotation on skills. Skills is like, and again, as I said, an important data piece. But it's not the most important, arguably. I would say the most important is actually like, what is the work to be done? Like skills. So skills are about people, right? Tasks are about work. If you only know skills and you don't know work, well, what are you going to do with that information? There's very limited use cases for that. So one of the biggest problems that I've seen is the fact that this whole skills thing has been talked about by itself, as opposed to being balanced with let's get as good data on the work to be done. So skills and tasks, or whatever you want to call it. That's number one. Number two, there's this message that if you are skills based, like somehow you don't have jobs. And I find this ludicrous. Like there's a lot of reasons that you have jobs in organizations. And so, I mean, at least for EPAM, we're whatever, an example of a skills.
You mean all work isn't going to be deconstructed and we're all going to be Uber drivers?
I can't with that.
Eventually?
I can't. It just flies in the face of psychology and actually understanding how skills and work cluster from a data perspective. It doesn't make sense. But anyway, so that's a big problem that I see in the market. And another one is the fact that all this skills stuff discussions are being had by HR. But skills is a reflection of human capital, and human capital is it's a business asset. People are the ones, the engine of the business getting done. And the whole skills thing and the whole just intelligence around people thing is about an optimization of human capital. And so the fact that this is all being discussed in HR is a big problem, because it actually needs to be done with the business, particularly in line with something like AI strategy, because AI is about the reallocation of work between humans and technology. And you need the skills, intelligence, and a bunch of other things to meaningfully do that well. And there's a bunch of other ones too, but there's from a hype perspective, I don't know if that's really hyped up. I think it's actually under-articulated, frankly. But from a how do we get there and why are we doing it and who's talking about it and what are we aiming for, I think a lot of that got wrong.
It's amazing how much stuff just comes back to foundational IO stuff, in this case, job analysis. Let's just figure out what people need to do and then, find that, I don't know, right key for the lock, as it were. Check this out. The way I'm thinking about it is a couple different sliders. So when you talk about skills, it could be anything from super broad. We need, I don't know, someone with programming skills. Well, whatever. And on the other end of that slider, maybe we need someone to run XGBoost in Python for whatever reason. It's a slider, right? And then the other slider would be how good are you on that skill, right? So I mean, I think that's kind of where the debate really, or not debate, but the naysayers may come in to the skills argument. It's too broad, too narrow, or there's just it's like the Tower of Babel. It's just a cross communication. People aren't talking about it in the same way. We don't have a common way to think about it.
Well, it's also, I think, just data can be nested. I feel like the people who are pushing back on this concept don't fundamentally think about think about skills as data versus skills as a term that we attach other words to. This is all a data construct. Everything that we're talking about here is just, again, it's about collecting using data. So you can operationally define skills, and we do, at different levels of granularity. And you can call them I don't care what you call them. It's the inherent stuff that people bring to do their job.
And I love what you were saying about this should be really a partnership between HR and the business. HR should not be determining what the business needs, right, in their employees. Cole's been harping on this for a long time, how to get us as HR, as more involved in the business as possible.
Yeah, but I feel like I've been a broken record. I've been trying to talk about it less, because I feel like I got to a point there where I was talking about every episode and it just got annoying. But yeah, it's still true as ever. And you're not saying this, Sandra, in my opinion, for just I feel like a lot of the folks that are on the hype side of the skills are just kind of let's call it new entrants to the conversation, who are just hey, I just discovered skills. Let me tell you why it's great. Right. And I would say that, you come from an academic discipline. You at one point were a professor, and then you made the transition into industry. Can you talk about what that was like and why maybe that equips you to talk about this from a point of having a research backing and all of that?
I mean, well, it was my first real job, right? So it turns out the real world's different than academia, and I love it. Will never go back. but it was right. And I don't want to like go down, like I love, academia is wonderful, but it was like, I came to EPAM because I wanted to make a difference. That sounds so trite, but it's true. And I wanted to make a difference in a different way, at a grander scale, and in a way where I don't know, like the definition of success was pretty straightforward. And so I've actually I loved this transition. I wish that more people getting PhDs in our space like knew that there was a whole like world out there that is beyond the academy. But I think and I will say, like, it's not like my PhD's in skills. My PhD's in learning, right? Skills is like evidence that someone has learned something, and you can look at a delta in someone's skill to figure out if they have in fact learned something. But it's not like I got my PhD in like skills-based organizations. Like the reason that I talk about it, and I talk about it with some, I don't know, like grounding, is because I work for a company that actually has been doing this. Like they're really doing it. It's not like theoretical. It's not like, like in a small portion of the company. Like we're like 60,000 people. We do this at 55 countries. This is what we do. And so when I talk about it, I have the conviction because I'm coming from a place of like practice. But then on top of that, I think my kind of academic background helps me articulate the data part of this, which I think a lot of people just, again, they don't think of it as a data issue. And I used to be a researcher, like I'm all about quantifying things. And then also because I feel like I can talk about the way that kind of the mechanisms of a skills-based organization, how they drive human behavior. And that's like just the psychology background. Like, and all of these things come together. And so it's like, it's kind of an amazing opportunity to be able to come with an academic background into a place of practice and share what we're learning like with the world.
I wish this was said to more PhD students who think that the only path is academics, right? As the great Cole Napper said, like PhD is just a license to learn. I performed network analysis. I'd never heard of it before I left the school. All right. I thought I was going to go into psychometrics.
Yeah, same.
But it would provide you a fantastic background. Like it's liberal arts, right?
It is. And it's like critical thinking and research. And that's, like, which is all wonderful. But it's funny, like IO Psych, like I think, in you guys' field, like there's a natural orientation to go work for companies because you're doing org, right? But in my world, like it is like an anathema. Like I am like ashamed to my PhD program because I didn't go into research, but I loved this and it worked for me, and I wish that more people would do it.
Yeah. Well, and I just to build on that, you're also ashamed to your field because I saw on your LinkedIn that you said that you're a training hater.
Oh my God,
or
I
something
hate it.
like that. I was like, you're a learning professional and you say you hate training. I'm like, this girl's an enigma. I love it.
Okay, let me get on a little soapbox here. Just give me one little second. So, okay. Learning and education are not the same thing. Most learning does not happen in the context of any sort of educational environment. It happens from observation and feedback and reflection and investigation and whatever. And so, I want to separate the distinction between teaching someone something and them having learned it. Because I think in the HR and L&D field, we are so focused on like inputs to people. How many hours of content, how many training courses, who's clicked on stuff. None of that's about learning. Learning happens in the mind of an individual. So I can't stand that. And then second, like to me, training is like where you just are talking about the inputs and no one's even bothered to figure out what somebody knew before you trained them or knew after you trained them. Like I know that it's semantic, but I have like this visceral reaction to education as a proxy for learning. They're not the same thing.
You went through the course. You should know it. That sort of thing.
Yes.
We know the training transfer is like 5%.
Exactly.
It's like barely anything. Sandy Pentland from MIT, he estimates that 90% of learning comes through social learning. So watching other people, like you see what gets rewarded, what gets punished, what people actually do, this sort of thing.
Exactly. And it's like, and it also, I mean, there's also different kinds of learning too, right? So you can learn how to do sort of like rote activities, and you can learn entirely new conceptual spaces, right? So a lot of it is, and what's like, I wish people, when they were thinking about like workplace learning, would learn the word transfer, because that's actually what we're talking about. It's like it's not
How am I going to use
memorization.
this?
Yeah. And so like a lot of what, we in my field always focused on was like there's three kinds of knowledge, right? You have declarative knowledge, procedural, and then conditional. Conditional is the one that no one ever talks about, but that's the one that is most predictive of someone being able to take what they have been taught and actually apply it in the wild. And that's like, we just don't do that well.
So you think about like Nate Bargatze, the comedian.
Love him. Yes.
He has this bit about math teachers. He's like, you pay these people and we got to teach them math. Do they want to learn math? No, they hate math. They don't want to learn any of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I love how it was like, it was the new math where basically like you had the front door and he was like, no, but come around in the back, and you're like, but like, that was a great bit. I love to use that one.
I mean, like it's a broader point, but like, yes, if you show people how they can use this, how they can be better, how they can be faster, more efficient, more accurate, they will pay attention, right? That they will use it if it's applicable.
Or they won't.
Well,
or they won't.
But like, I don't know. I'm also very much like a realist when it comes to like, everyone says they want to learn stuff, and probably they do, but learning takes effort. And so just because it's applicable doesn't mean that I'm going to do it. Like, I mean, people are very simple, right? Like they tend to do things that benefit them or what they have to do, especially in a workplace. And so this whole like, I don't know, I talk a lot with the like executives who are like, well, if we just build this amazing learning program that's like really relevant and whatever. And I'm like, oh, nothing will happen. I mean, it will happen for 5% of people who are going to be the ones who would have figured out on their own anyway. Like you can't just put learning in front of people and expect that magic will happen.
That was one of my riffs when I moved into management that I never figured out is like the word development is so misunderstood. It has such a positive brand. Everybody hates being developed when it's actually happening.
Yes.
And it makes no sense. Everybody's like, oh, I want development. I was like, you were getting a little bit of development last week and you were complaining the whole time.
Oh yeah. Like so in my so at EPAM, like I have been I've been client facing and not client facing and client facing but then I'm not client facing right now. But when I was, one of the biggest things that we built were like executive education programs that were designed for like technology leaders. And we had to teach them like big, broad concepts around like, what is cloud? How do you use cloud? What are the trade-offs? And what areas are you going to leverage this? How are you going to get people to change how they work? How are you like this big stuff? And we would not work with any clients who would not allow us to give these executives, like I'm talking like C-suite -1, -2, to give them assessments of their knowledge before and after, like literally, and like on paper, because and it was like, and they hated it. You can imagine like executives at these like major companies, like sitting down, doing what amounts to a test, like a situational analysis test. And at the end, and of course, and those scores are reported, by the way, to the executive. Like it was like high stakes.
Yeah, and those executives love when their scores get reported, right?
So it's so funny. So like, and then of course at the end we would ask them like, of all the different elements in the learning program, like all the many things that we did, like what was most effective for your learning? And something like 40-something% of them were like, it was the test. Because it forced them to learn. And it's not like they didn't want to learn, but everyone's busy. You have 800 emails that are on fire in your inbox every day. Who has time for learning? Very few people. And so you have to basically like carrots and sticks, like provide incentives for people to learn what you want them to learn when you want them to learn it and to the degree you want them to learn it. And like anything beyond that is, I think, a fool's errand. And that's why so much learning has like zero ROI or training. Excuse me.
So you match not only the learning with the accountability. And now all of a sudden people are wildly motivated.
Yeah. I mean, it works. Like, I don't know. There's this thing in my field. It's called Theory One. I think it's like the most beautifully distilled psychology of people. And it's something like people will do much of what they have the reasonable opportunity and motivation to do. Period.
Yeah. You show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. Charlie Munger quote. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I'm wondering, so you're deep in this space, right? You're deep in the skills, development, learning, and even like on the technology side. Is the future of skills just HR technology, or is it something else?
Well, HR technology is, I think you're talking about like SaaS products, right? Like
like software,
software. So
Yeah.
in fields outside of HR, they're moving away from software. They're moving into like data as a service, agentic architecture type stuff. So I think that to date, we as a field have conflated skills with specific SaaS tools because that was the mechanism, right? But again, skills are just data. It's just one source of many sources of data. And so the architecture of the future, I think, is going to be much less reliant on SaaS and much more reliant on data feeds feeding up into a single like data space, like lake or mesh or whatever. And that's where you have all your agents and automations and workflows happening. And skills is just data that's being extracted from all of the different like systems of record and work, but along with a bunch of other things too, like context. Like in what context was that skill deployed, in what environment, in what industry, when? Like, I mean, there's just so many pieces of data that have to go around skills, and that's not even talking about the tasks, which is like again the other side of the coin. And so I think this like skills exist in SaaS products is not a long-term.
It has like a half-life. Yeah. And then, I mean, skills become, and the tasks as well, become the rare earth minerals of the future human capital that organizations are trying to optimize. I love that. I love that mentality. Yeah. I think you even said like you have like a superpower for getting people to do hard things. I was like, what the hell does that mean?
It means like, it's again, like it goes back to this whole Theory One thing, is like you just have to think about like in whatever context it is, learning or behavior, whatever it is, what are all the reasons that people aren't doing it? And some of it's internal, some of it's a motivation issue, some of it's a knowledge gap or whatever. But a lot of it is organizational. There are misaligned incentives. Processes suck. It's too hard. You don't have the right technology. And so I guess my superpower is being able to like take my like psychology background and think about like Bronfenbrenner's like nested construct. Like you think about a person in environments and think about all of the things that are accelerators and brakes for them behaving in a certain way. And then you learn to manipulate them. And like, if you can do that, like it turns out people are pretty straightforward. They do stuff.
I would love to have you on my team. Like we used to have behavioral scientists, and like that was the ultimate dream. I've worked at different companies with behavioral scientists, and they just like, yeah, so we run some numbers. Like, no, this is your job. This is your job to make shit happen, and when they don't want it to happen.
Yes, it's great, and it's like it's so fun. I mean, it's fun. It's like manipulation, but in a very pro-social way. It's positive, like manipulation for good.
Well, I mean, not to invoke his name twice, but Sandy Pentland, he has a book called Social Physics, and it's all about, setting up the social incentives to get people to do things, from, using less water at their house to, investing in different stock options. It's absolutely fascinating.
It's, again, like people are so complex and yet so simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow the herd.
Is this a Beetlejuice type situation where we say it a third time he'll pop into the podcast?
That would be terrifying. I hope not. Not prepared for that this morning.
Well, Scott, do you have a confusion matrix for us today? The confusion matrix.
Oh, you want to do some? Oh man, Sandra, this isn't good for you.
Okay.
I can't lie. Like I made this earlier in the week, and I was reviewing it this morning, and okay.
Not good.
We love our Gen Z friends, so this is very Gen Z centric. Okay.
Right.
So these questions, we got 5 questions. give the best answer you can. If Cole is happy with your answer, he'll make you a social media tile that you can, give to your friends and family. Okay. This is gonna be so embarrassing. I can't lie. Okay. What has you more low-key stressed? The mid factory or the silent disco at the office?
Oh God, the silent disco.
Yes.
Mm.
I don't
Sorry,
know what
friends.
these words are.
In theory, the mid factory is just like totally uninspiring work, while the silent disco is everyone has their headphones on, just hanging out at the office and not talking to each other.
Yeah.
Which that's where the learning happens, right, Sandra?
Yeah, within your headphones. Yeah, sure.
Do you go to the office, Cole? Do you go to the office at all?
Not well. I've been once since I started here, but not at my last job. I did.
Oh, okay. Here you go, Sandra. If you could create a metric to measure meetings that should have been an email, what would you call it?
Can it be a drinking game?
Absolutely. Why not?
Yes.
Everything's on the table.
I have these like I've seen bingo cards. I would have to like modify them, but I would love to just have a AI at the end of every meeting be like scoring it against this and be like, this should have been a meeting and you got dinged. There's like some electrode that shocks you because you shouldn't have done that again.
What was it? Salesforce, Cole, that had like every meeting had a dollar value attached to it based on employees.
No, that was Spotify.
Spotify.
No, it was Shopify. Sorry.
Shopify.
Yeah, get those two confused. But yeah, I was thinking about the drinking game. It would be fun if every time somebody said, "Sorry, I've been in back-to-back meetings," or or they waved at the end of a Zoom meeting. Maybe if you drank every time somebody did that, that would be an epic drinking game.
It would be like it would be more fun work. Let's just say more relaxed meetings, probably.
See, and Scott, I thought you were going to be nice to her with the Confusion Matrix today because she was a self-proclaimed Star Trek fan.
Oh,
like Scott's going to love this.
Here, I will share something. I just completed a journey to watch every episode of every season of Star Trek, and because I'm a network analysis nerd, I mapped it all out. So I kept track. I noted every. Here, wait. Let me vamp for a second.
Every Star Trek like series?
Yeah,
like all of them.
All of them. Yeah, hold on. I'm trying to get it.
What people without kids do.
Oh,
wait. Bear with me. I'm trying to work our systems. There you go.
Whoa.
That's the entire network of every season, every episode, and how the various characters interacted. So you got your Picard area, the TNG, your
Okay.
TOS.
Scott, can I ask some technical questions here?
Absolutely.
You did not manually code this, right? How did you scrape it from somewhere? How did you get this information?
No, I sat there and watched every episode, and I developed
serious?
I developed a spreadsheet in Excel, and every column was who was interacting in that scene, and then I developed an R program to process it all, and then aggregate them all together into one massive
I don't know if
network.
this is a gift to humanity or you're a crazy person.
And wait, I have a question. Was this like, did you count? So every time there was an interaction, so there could be like 20 interactions in one episode between two characters, or is it like how many episodes?
No, this is every scene. Like, so whenever two characters talk, when Worf's talking to Data, I'll have to show you. I don't have that. At least I don't want to share my screen and show it to you. But yeah, I can share that with you after the pod. I'll show you what it looks like behind the scenes.
That's fascinating. Okay.
But yeah, the plan is I have a massive canvas that's like 6 foot by 4 foot. And I'm going to print this out and put it on there.
Wow.
It's Scott's version of modern art. I love it.
Yeah, totally.
And the movies you didn't do the movies, right?
The movies actually messed up where did I get back to you guys? The movies actually messed up
Sorry, I took you off again.
Thank you, sir. The movies actually messed up the network, but I don't have them included. But let me tell you, like trying to get through Discovery at the very end of this slog, I also went chronological order. So you start with Star Trek Enterprise, then go to The Cage and Strange New Worlds, then TOS. See if I can do this. TOS, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. Yeah. After Voyager becomes, I think, Picard, then Prodigy, and Lower Decks, then Discovery again, because that spans over 1,000 years.
Yeah, you have put me to shame, like absolute. Like I like TNG.
And DS9.
That's true.
Oh yeah, I mean the first like 2 seasons of DS9 are like the pinnacle of Star Trek.
Agreed.
We're going way deep. I didn't mean to share my nerdness this hard, but I mean, yeah, I'm in it to win it. It started out as a pandemic project in 2020, and I didn't do what I thought was good enough job. So I started over about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, and yeah, every episode there's like I don't know 1,000 of them. It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, the chicks dig it. The chicks love it. So I mean, what are you gonna do?
So you won't be alone for much longer, right? Like you're gonna have a little Star Trek nerd friend.
Oh my god! I mean, it's getting hot in here. You know what I'm talking about?
Because it keeps getting brought up on this podcast, people have started bringing up Star Trek stuff to me, and I've realized that there is this notion when I tell people, I was like, "Oh, I've never watched it before." They think I mean I'm looking for recommendations of where to start, and so they start telling me like, "Oh yeah, you absolutely when you start watching it, you should start here." I'm like, "No,
No, just kidding. Not watching it. Like, haven't watched it, will not watch it, refuse. Okay.
I'm open to it, but like, don't force it on me."
Okay. That's what my kids
Because
say.
I'm also a wild nerd, and like I can run all the network statistics on the background, and this has specific Gen AI relationships. The biggest, most bridging node in the entire network is computer. Like when they say computer, do this. So like there's parallels to what we're going through as a society. Like we're feeding all of our information to a central database that's going to be the biggest arbiter of information.
Yeah.
And even if we're not, Scott's going to watch all the episodes and manually transcribe it later.
I'll tell you what, I could not imagine watching an episode of Star Trek right now. Like I am so done.
I bet.
I am so fucking done.
You took all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
I kind of did. But yes, TNG is the GOAT. It's the best overall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more confusion matrix for us, Scott?
I mean, I could, but what's the point?
Did I pass, you guys?
Hit us with one more at least.
Okay.
You want one more?
Yeah.
Let me trick a good one. Here, we'll run through them very quickly. What about Return to Office gives you the ick? Anything?
Yes, I'm a person who believes that like you can do most things remotely, not everything, but most things. And so the forcing of people to go in and like just cuz it reveals to me bad management, and that's just you just lay that all out there for the world. That's ick.
It's what do they call it? Type Y management, type X organization. I can't remember.
Theory X, Theory Y.
Theory, yeah. For me, it's just people at standing desks while I'm sitting down. Like you're in the queue and they stand up. It's like, get off.
I haven't been in an office context, like going to the office for real for like 10 years, like more than 10 years. So
oh, you don't know.
I'll give you the skinny on what happens when you go to an office. Stanley cups. They're everywhere.
why?
I don't know what. Somebody got some memo somewhere and everybody has a Stanley cup on their desk.
Nah.
If you could create a vibe check metric, what would go into it?
Earring size. Can I just do women?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. Earring size and height of heel.
You're like Instant Row with the earrings there. There you go. Look.
My philosophy is go big or go home. Like when it
Yes.
comes to earrings, like either lean in or just don't.
Or Quark's mother in Deep Space Nine. She has the crazy earrings.
Yeah. Those are super cool earrings.
Okay, okay, final one. What is more cap? The email dungeon or the clout farm?
Okay. Do you have young children? What are these words? Like I know some of them because I have a 15-year-old, but like I don't know all of them, so I'm going to go with option B, please.
The clout farm. Yeah, I guess that's just code for brown nosing. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, I need a dictionary. Like, clearly, I'm like beyond uncool.
Let's move on. This is so bad.
All right,
Bad.
let's do some nerdery. The nerdery. I don't even know what article is probably the best transition to start with. Do you want to talk career hurdles first, Scott?
Is that yours?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that one. That was a good one.
Okay. So the first article we've got was it's a little dated now, but it's still pretty new. From Ng and Feldman in 2014, did a meta-analysis showing the relationship between career hurdles and people's feelings of subjective career success. And thanks to Ludic Stellick for friend of the podcast, put together kind of this cool visualization of the research where it shows all the negative correlations to subjective career success, or I guess lack of career success. And some of the top ones that they found were unmet expectations as a career hurdle, low core self-evaluations, low general supervisor support, low career-related supervisor support, job dissatisfaction, low work engagement, low occupational commitment, and low organizational commitment as well. They studied, I think, probably around 30 or 40 different factors here, and they categorized them into trait-related, skill-related, motivational, social network hurdles, organizational and job hurdles, and background-related hurdles. But I thought it was interesting, just unmet expectations being the highest, or I guess the lowest correlation, or the most negative correlation to subjective career success. Did you get a chance to look through this one, Sandra? And did you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, I did, and it seems like to me that was kind of a duh, right? If you you have unmet expectations, you have perceived like career lack of success. Clearly, your expectations were not met.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe you're defining a word with a word, right? Because like unmet expectations is kind of definitionally lack of subjective career success.
Exactly.
Yeah, that does make sense. But I did think it was interesting, like a low core self-evaluation. That's sort of similar to like low self-esteem, low supervisor support. I mean, that obviously is probably related.
Yeah.
And just being dissatisfied and disengaged, those having relationships. And so I thought this was interesting. Scott, did you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, it's wildly interesting. If you look at the full pattern of results, like I just read it as fundamental attribution error. So like the things that are the lowest are, my manager didn't help me. I'm not getting the sort of training I need. All this sort of stuff. The things that people don't attribute to low career success is like my education level. I didn't get the, my low grade point average in college. Essentially like, yeah, so what? I smoked pot in college. I smoked pot throughout my 30s, and somehow my career isn't going the way I want it. But the fact that my manager didn't help me out the entire time, that's the real issue right there.
When there were like 3 or 4 that actually had a slight positive correlation. And so it was few job position changes within an organization. So I'm out on that one. Being married, so I got that one covered, and having a high number of children. I don't know what a high number of children is, because having children was just a 0 correlation, but having a high number helps you out for some reason.
Well, you think about those are stability factors, right? Those are things that make you feel stable, and like I guess you're happy overall.
Or trapped?
Evidently not. I mean, if they feel like it's relates to positive career success, if only marginal, really.
Yeah, maybe the high number just has to deal with like at a certain number of children, you're just desperate. You like, I better make this career work out.
Yeah.
You have no choice. You have a lot of mouths to feed.
It is a self-evaluation as well. Like, so, I mean, you just reframe your mind. Like, yeah, this is what it is. I'm happy enough.
I am successful.
I got enough going on. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Where are you going to go next, Scott?
Let's do the return to office, in-office run-in, spark innovation.
This one was fascinating.
This is wild research. Guy at MIT. That's the third time I reference MIT today, but not the same guy.
It's not Sandy Pentland. Sorry, Sandy.
This is a David Atkin. Is that right? David Atkin. But this deals with knowledge spillovers as a result of face-to-face interaction. So previous research has struggled to directly measure and isolate the effects of how face-to-face interactions relate to, later innovation. It's often confounded with things like geographic proximity, but these researchers essentially use cell phone data in Silicon Valley. And so it's the cell phone will ping the tower like every 3 to 5 minutes. So you can geolocate where people are. And they got 50,000 Silicon Valley employees, across various tech fields to participate in this study. And they had, I think it was 18,000 geographic locations that they knew of. And they also measured patent citations that resulted from these interactions. So whenever you file a patent, you also have to follow the lineage of the patent. So anything that resulted in a patent. So if I met Cole for dinner and we had a great conversation, I have an idea later, I may cite something that Cole had filed a patent on previously. And they made this, you say like, okay, so like, how do they know if two people are actually meeting? They made this meeting probability metric. So given how much they move around together in a common location, how likely are they to actually have met? And the results are really kind of wild. So there's obviously a stronger link in meeting probability and more patents being filed. Specifically, a 25% reduction in meetings resulted in an 8% reduction in citations. So you may think like, well, okay, it's correlational. It's not really causational. So they also tested they focus on unrelated industries. So I don't know. You got the flower industry versus like the suntan lotion industry. So even those resulted in a greater chance of co-citations. So having a face-to-face interaction has the same impact as if you reduce the difference in half between buildings. And similar effect was seen for meetings outside of office hours. And they said that if a company left Silicon Valley, you'd expect an 8% drop in citations and a 30% drop for Stanford citations. So they liken this to a need for better office planning, office space planning, and better city planning overall.
Yeah. I've seen that Y Combinator, which is a startup incubator based out of Silicon Valley, I think is requiring their newest batches of startups to be in person together. And I think it's just because of research like this. But if you had to like put the net of it, Scott, because there was a lot of meat on the bone there in terms of what you described. What's kind of the main takeaway? Is it? I mean, I took it as like, face to face interactions matter, but can you build on that?
Yeah, those face-to-face interactions lead to innovation. They figured out a way to do it. If you like scroll to, I think it's like page 40, there's a map of Silicon Valley, and they can, see the geolocations of everybody. They can track people golf hole by golf hole and see where they are and see the probability of actually meeting within each other. So yes, face-to-face interactions matter, and we've covered previous research on the pod before about the difference between mediated communications and face-to-face interaction. It's just far more powerful, far more influential to be in person.
Yeah,
for the spread of knowledge. Anyway,
what do you think, Sandra?
Oh, I think it makes perfect sense. I think the question is only like to what there's also trade-offs with all the face-to-face, right? So you have to figure out like what is the right cadence, and that's going to be different for different like levels of expertise, different industries, like different job functions. So I mean, I think that provides kind of really fascinating quantitative data on what everybody kind of knows. But what to do with that from a policy perspective in any organization is still kind of like, how do you balance it all?
And in fairness, what they're hitting on here is the weak ties. So people you don't see very often that can provide unique levels of information. It's not the person you see that sits next to you. They stand up while you sit down, right? It's not that person. It's people you don't talk to very often allow you to spread ideas and get new information.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you about this methodologically, Scott?
Sure.
Because I think there's like this debate, especially with AI coming on, is like, I was talking to a researcher at a leading university earlier this week about this, is like all the technology already exists. We don't have to wait for AI to get better, right? It already exists today. It just might not be packaged together to create like a complete employee surveillance state. And you could do some really badass research if you just track everything about a person, their heartbeat, their blood pressure, all these things that can be inferred by, videos or geolocation and what have you. So I guess the question I have for you is like, does this line of research, which was fascinating and really insightful, is it ethical? Is it where we should be really leaning into? How do you think about that as we move forward?
I mean, there's a micro way to answer that as far as like this research. I think it was called like Safe Tech. That's the company that they used to gather this data. Everyone agreed to participate. They spent a considerable amount of paper to talk about anonymization and this sort of stuff. So, I mean, everyone opted in, all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure they had to go through IRB, which may have been a fucking nightmare, honestly. But from a broader perspective, these are sort of things we're going to have to wrestle with. And like, not only like how are we going to use this technology, but if you're a global organization, how's that different? What's the difference between the EU and America and, different places? And how do you measure this sort of stuff?
All the French accents.
All the French accents. Yeah.
We talk about EPAM, like that's what we do. We collect data on all kinds of things. That's how we can draw so many inferences around skills and a bunch of other stuff too. And I get asked a lot, do people hate that? Like, do they hate the idea of like kind of like a big brother? And the answer is like, no, people actually like, because you get a lot of benefit out of it. If it was just Big Brother, I don't know, like there's no value to you, then of course nobody would like that. But everyone likes having career paths and a more sense of meritocracy. They like knowing what their skills are and what they're missing. And they like being able to see where they can go with their career. And so it's funny, like a lot of people think that it would be such a big pushback for organizations to collect this sort of data, but we have not seen that at all.
Well, and you can't stop them either. Like we've seen a lot of that with like the mouse tracking software and all this stuff that happened is like organizations just roll it out. They don't care if people don't like it.
And on the cell phone front, we are also easily giving up our information to, say, Apple and Google for the trade-off. So like the whole benefit of, say, like a mapping program isn't to know where you are on the map, is to know that you're 27 minutes away from the airport and there's a wreck in the middle of that. And it gives you a peace of mind. It's exactly the same thing. Is people ahead of you feeding that information back to you in the back end, and we're all like letting them ping our information constantly.
I mean, like, I think a lot of people don't realize how much data is being tracked on them, like not even close. But I mean, the fact is, you're right. Like look at the whole TikTok thing. There's like a literal national security concern that's been articulated, and people are like, but my videos. Like, we don't.
Totally.
Like, we don't care. There are very few people that genuinely care about their privacy. And, we have to at some point grapple with this as a society, because even if bad things haven't happened yet, they can. And it's probably a matter of time. And then this pendulum might shift back. But right now, people are like, take it. Give me my 27-minute analysis.
Shout out to Edward Snowden. Totally.
Yeah. Well, let me dig into that for a second, because there's kind of two schools of thought on this. Like one of our previous guests, and they asked us not to talk about in the episode, so I won't name them, but they were very much embroiled in the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal. And so there's actually two schools of thought on it. It's like, oh, that they actually used all this, digital exhaust and digital data, and were able to influence and swing elections and all this kind of stuff. And then there's another school of thought, which is, yeah, but all that's noise. Like you can get the information, but can you really do anything with it at scale? Can you really get somebody to change their behavior? To your whole point from earlier, Sandra, about getting people to actually learn is really, really hard. Getting behavior change is really, really hard to do. So I don't know, like does like the whole digital exhaust, the big data, collecting everything on everybody, does it actually matter or does it not matter?
I think there's a lot of evidence to show that it does in fact matter. Right? Like, let's just look at marketing, pure marketing, like all of this crappy, stupid pop-up ads that you get because they saw that you were talking about this thing with like it's working. People are responding. They are spending money to purchase the things that they're being pushed. And that only is coming because everyone's been collecting and pulling the right signals from data. I think there's no question that it works.
I mean, like marketing firms wouldn't spend the money on that if it didn't work. And here you go. Here's Beetlejuice, Sandy Pentland. That's what they're doing. His whole bit is exposure. The amount of exposure you have to information is the best predictor you have of change. So if whatever you see other people doing, or like how many times you see it, you're going to start thinking that way too. And you see this in social media. You get pockets of people that they start spinning themselves up, and you see it politically. They become more and more extreme the more they talk to each other, because it's greater and greater amounts of exposure. And
that's all data driven. It's all like they know what I like. They're giving me more of what I like. So I'm going down this like rabbit hole. And I don't think there's a question that this data collection makes a huge difference. I think the bigger question is, to what degree is society being shaped by this in ways that we don't fully understand?
Absolutely. Well, and sorry, Scott. For a half second there, I thought Sandy Pentland was going to show up. I was like, is he going to show up? Oh my gosh, that would be so crazy.
We won't do that to Sandra. Absolutely not.
Oh, that would be wild. Do you want to hit us with the last nerdy article, Scott?
Yeah, and I probably would not have picked this if I'd actually looked at the methods. So this is personality disorders as predictors of counterproductive work behaviors.
It was kind of sketchy.
Yeah. So it investigates how personality disorders influence counterproductive work behaviors, specifically knowledge sharing in organizations. It was kind of wild. Like the first 2 pages are dedicated to this story about this guy watching workers fry chicken in a kitchen, and one doesn't tell him that the other one's the chicken's burning. Anyway, so they surveyed 120 people. This is where it starts getting a little iffy, using Mechanical Turk. So count the red flags. Yeah. And they use some sort of the million clinical multi-actual inventory, whatever, it doesn't matter. But they measured 3 types of outcomes: knowledge hoarding, knowledge hiding, and knowledge sabotage. And they found that employees with clinically significant personality disorders, which 120 people, you're finding clinically significant disorders, that's kind of wild, are more likely to hide knowledge, specifically dependent personality, narcissistic personality, sadistic personality, schizophrenic disorder, and delusional disorder. Once again, 120 people, finding all these people in their data. Pretty wild. Most personality disorders do not facilitate knowledge hoarding. However, some actually do participate. Some personality disorders do actually facilitate knowledge sharing, histrionic, turbulent, and compulsive, whatever. But the interesting finding is that we should reconsider assumptions about why people have counterproductive knowledge disorders and knowledge hoarding disorders, and it may just be part of their gut biome. I think that's the big takeaway.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about it, and I mean, methodology put aside for a second, is I think when we think about counterproductive work behaviors, we just assume normal people, or normative people, let's call it, are the ones who are engaging in these, unethical or unsavory behaviors. But what this research shows, if there's any validity to it, is that it's actually some of the crazy people are at work. And they're the ones who might be the ones who are actually doing most of these counterproductive work behaviors. So it could be the person, not the behavior.
Have you ever worked with someone insane? And they're like, oh my God.
Worked in HR, yeah, man.
I don't think I've ever worked with someone that's just off their rocker.
But manipulative people, I mean, some of the most successful leaders, arguably, they got a little personality disorder going on.
I mean, to work that hard, that far, to be that competitive, you got to have something going on, right?
Knowledge hoarding. Actually, knowledge hoarding was the worst one of all of them. Knowledge hiding is more likely.
I had this weird situation because the article does talk about narcissistic and sadistic personality, but also schizophrenic and delusional clinical patients. And in college, I worked at a mental health hospital for a while because I was studying at the time clinical psychology before I moved into IO psychology. And I had this patient showed up that was just catatonic, literally, not hyperbolically, catatonic for weeks. And then they left. And then I ran into them at a party. And they were completely normal. And I was like, wow, the human mind is so crazy.
Terrifying.
Yeah. And again, it was all in their head, I guess, psychologically speaking. And that was wild. And that was one of the many reasons why I got out of that. I was like, I don't know if I can handle all this.
Too close.
The body just put them in a little cocoon for a while. I was like, hey, we need to go to our chrysalis stage before we become a butterfly.
Absolutely. Well, Sandra, this has been a fascinating conversation. We covered a lot of territory here. You've been a really great guest today. Scott, any parting words for Sandra before we wrap this thing up?
Oh, it's a pleasure. I think we met at Talreos, actually. But so maybe this is the second time we were talking. What would you say are
You were at Talreos, Sandra?
No, I don't think so. I'm whispering.
Oh, never mind. I'm totally wrong there. Well, what would you say our top skills are besides forgetting skills? Misremembering skills.
Yeah. I don't I think you have excellent methodological analysis skills.
Oh,
how about that?
I love that. I practiced my wordy skills today. Definitely.
I think that's great. Also, bullshitting skills was that's something that everyone needs to develop more of, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I'm more into the poop sharing skills, to go full circle.
Bullshit, human shit, whatever.
Well, Sandra, this has been fantastic. And Thank you so much for joining us today. You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott. And today's guest, Sandra Loughlin. Thanks for joining us, Sandra.
Thanks, guys.